nice to be here one more time, the 10th day of the month of June, the year 2021. And this has been a long day, especially in Kenya, when the budget has officially been presented to the National Assembly by the Ministry of Treasury, that is the Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani. A lot has been said, but we are gathered here tonight with our analysts who have immense experience and also knowledge on matters economy linked with politics. We're joined by our resident analyst, that is Mr. Edgar Kosgei and also Mr. Edwin Kegoli. And together we will look into a number of things that have been brought out today in the budget at the National Assembly. My name is Cornelius Omuse and I welcome you to join us in this conversation, which is also being broadcasted live on our social media platforms. That is Facebook, CAK TV Kenya, YouTube is CAK TV Kenya. You can also engage us on our SMS number, which is 22167. Keep it here. Gentlemen, welcome one more time to Power Brief. Mr. Kegoli, naona uko ndani ya patriotism.
Ndani ya taifa.
Many thanks, Kosgei, sharp as usual.
I know.
Karibu sana on Power Brief.
Yeah, I know.
And probably before we go to tonight's discussion, there's something that has been, especially yesterday and the day before yesterday, that is two former chief justices, that is Willy Mutunga and David Kenani Maraga. They have been up in arms with the office of the president, saying that the president has violated the constitution. And Dr. Maraga was very particular that President Kenyatta will be remembered as a president who has disregarded the rule of law in his tenure. And there are those ones who are saying these people have retired, they need to go and rest. And there are those ones who are saying they have their right as Kenyans and also those people who held such a position to continue bringing out these matters. What is your take on the position that these two former chief justices have taken?
Well, undeniably these are Kenyans, and every Kenyan has a right to opinion. And these are not just citizens, but Chief Justices Emeritus. So we take their opinion in high regard, and it is clear for everybody to tell if what the two Chief Justices are saying makes sense and if exactly is the truth. So it is up to the citizens to look into the merit of what they are raising. And you had of immediate former Chief Justice David Maraga on record while speaking on one of our TV stations saying he agrees to entirety in the letter that was released by the office of the former Chief Justice Dr. Willy Mutunga. So we take with high regard what they're saying, and then again we'll see what history will tell us.
Thank you.
To come.
Now, Mr. Kosgei, some people, especially the president's supporters, have been asking, do we have the office of the former chief justices, or are they just entitled to retirement benefits? Ama kuna hiyo ofisi, and they really wish to know where it is located so that some can start paying visits there.
I saw it. I saw it. I saw the office of the former.
Yeah.
I was like, that was bold. And then in the end, he signed Chief Justice. But what made the difference is the date. Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya from this date to this date.
Yes.
So he spoke with the authority of a Chief Justice. But can we as Kenyans learn to read what they are saying? Some people just see a letter that has been released into the media and you don't read. Or Musa, did you read? I don't know whether you read. But there are 4 points that he brought out. That Omuse, when you are taking an oath of public office, it means you have read the Constitution, right? I will uphold and I will protect this Constitution. People have not read the Constitution. They think it belongs to the lawyers. And they are upholding it. How do you uphold a Constitution that you have not read? So we should be reading the Constitution from Article 1 to the last article, to even the appendix. 2, when you say you are going to uphold the Constitution, that's Willy Mutunga saying. He said you cannot uphold one section and you reject another section. That is what he was telling the president. 3, the president said he had issues with 6 judges. Why don't you raise the issues with the Judicial Service Commission so that they can talk about it and they can see whether he still has fitness to the public office? The last one is that the Constitution that you're thinking of upholding, Article 166, stipulates how to appoint the President of the Supreme Court and the Vice President of the Supreme Court. And now the judges. That part says that the President of the Supreme Court has to be vetted by Parliament. But it says the judges will be appointed after being looked into by the Judicial Service Commission. And period. So Mutunga was saying, basically, as the former president of the Supreme Court, obey the Constitution that you swore to uphold.
Now, there is something here, Mr. Kosgei and also Mr. Edwin. Let's look into the separation of powers in Kenya. That is the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive, and their distinct roles. You really understand what the executive does, what the judiciary does, what this arm of the government called the legislature does. Here, the Judicial Service Commission, which we admit all of us that the president has got representatives in that commission,
Yes.
who says he ni sawa, he sio sawa. But at the same time, are we all right, or could we be right to blame the president when it is to the knowledge of almost all of us that the Judicial Service Commission do not have the capacity to have some of the intelligent information that probably Kosgei does not have, probably Edwin does not have, or even myself? Does the Judicial Service Commission have got that capacity?
The Judicial Service Commission depends on different sectors of the government of Kenya to get information on what is really happening. The DCI is one of the department of the government that the Judicial Service Commission will depend on in execution of this mandate. The doctrine of separation of powers is dear to the Kenyan Constitution. We have to see how the executive is going to act independently from the judiciary and from Parliament. But in this regard, there is no much separation of powers. There is interdependence. Look at the presence of the judiciary, of the executive in the judiciary, in the Judicial Service Commission. The Attorney General, you have mentioned, Attorney General, sits in there and champions government, champions what is government interested in the JSC. So, in as much as we're championing for the separation of powers, the executive is also present in there. The executive is also present in Parliament through the leader of the government business. Because that is the person.
So in summary, you are admitting that the executive still remains to be at the top.
Now,
that it can have a representative in the it must have a representative in the National Assembly, a representative in the judiciary, and in itself where it is.
Ukuri Attorney today read a budget. He got somewhere and said 34 billion is going to Parliament. 17 billion is going to the judiciary. Why is the executive dictating how the judiciary should spend it? Should spend the money? Because that is how you can strangle judiciary to death when you want to. That is what President Uhuru Kenyatta has been doing.
This will continue next week. It's a heated debate, but we will be looking into a number of these issues. First of all, we will look into when things goes south, who comes in to get the blame? Who comes in? Is it the Chief Justice? Is it they'll say the era of Muturi, the era of Uhuru, or the era of this individual called the president? That one will now come at our next discussion. But briefly, let's go into what has happened today just for the consumption of ourselves and also for our viewers. Edwin does not have somewhere to write. But we begin. The TSC, the Teacher Service Commission, got 281.7 billion. 77.7 billion has been allocated for university education, while 62.2 billion has been set aside for free day secondary education. Higher Education Loans Board got 15.8 billion. And then 1 billion will be used for competency-based curriculum, while 2.5 billion will be used for recruitment of additional teachers. And then 12 billion has been allocated for free primary education, and then 27.2 billion for construction of standard gauge railway, and then 454.1 million has been allocated for youth enterprise. Then we have 4.2 billion for KYEOP, and then 14.3 billion to COVID-19 vaccine. 5.8 billion will be used for malaria, HIV and TB prevention. 3.9 billion in vaccination and immunization programs, while 450 million will be used in the purchase of radiotherapy equipment at Kenyatta University Hospital. 863 million for procurement of family planning and reproductive health. 600 million procurement of equipment of blood and transfusion center. 1.97 billion will be for agriculture and food security. 1.2 billion for the recruitment of healthcare interns. 1 billion for the Kenya Wildlife Services. 3 billion for youth empowerment, the Kazi Mtani. And then water sector will take 39.1 billion has been allocated for water and sewerage infrastructure. And then 16.4 billion for water resource management, 9.6 billion for forest and water tower conservation, 10.4 billion for irrigation and land reclamation, 10.8 billion has been allocated to water storage, and 8.2 billion will be used in wildlife conservation. County government has been allocated 409.8 billion. And then the equitable share of revenue raised nationally by 7.5 billion. Additional conditional allocations for the national government, it has come to the county government will also get 32.3 billion as conditional allocation from the development partners. 23.1 billion has gone to economic recovery program. 2.6 billion to enhance liquidity to business. 6.4 billion comes to improving education outcome. 6.9 billion improving sanitation. 3.3 for EACC for fighting corruption. And then we have ODPP 7.6 billion. 5.9 billion for Office of the Auditor General. So that's just an outlook of what the government has done through the budgeting. But again, something is emerging here, beginning from you, Mr. Kegoli. The issue of taxation. The dangers of taxing or overtaxing society. Look at bread, look at the motorcycles, look at all these things that have been added, and the dangers, bearing in mind that currently the country is facing a pandemic.
Well, you know, an economy cannot grow if you're overtaxing citizens. Because when you raise taxes on the citizens, that means they have less disposable income. When I have less disposable income, that means I cannot spend outside the primaries, that is the basic commodities that I need to pay for my rent. I need to buy the basic food, not even any luxury meal. I have to feed on that basic plan, you know. So if I'm operating on a tight budget, that means there is less purchasing power. And when there is less purchasing power, that means our GDP is not growing. Because if retail sales are not moving, then the economy is not working. So perhaps we need also to bring ourselves to alive to the fact that we are in a pandemic, and whatever economic measures that we are putting in place or what the government is advancing to the country should be sensitive and careful to the fact that we need to stimulate the economy. Many people have lost jobs. Look at how many people were unemployed prior to this pandemic. When the pandemic struck, it meant we have now double figures of people who have been rendered jobless, There are those who didn't have jobs at all. There are those who had jobs and lost jobs. Look at our hospitality sector. Look at our tourism. These are sectors that have taken the hardest hit. So when we are faced with a situation as it is today, the steps and actions government should take is to bring back people to productivity, so that, you see, any shilling you spend is an income to somebody else. When you go out there to buy a suit, that means that vendor there has gotten some income. And when he or she gets that income, he'll go again and make a purchasing somewhere. That means that other person has got income. If you don't buy, that means that person is being rendered jobless and is being sent out of the market. So if we focus on taxation and nothing else but taxation, then we are regressing the economy. We are suppressing our ability and potential to maneuver during this pandemic. So whatever budgetary intervention measures that the government should be putting in place, it should be centered heavily on doing recovery, on lifting the country, ensuring that the market, like there is circulation of money in the market, people are enabled to make purchases, so that our GDP is growing. If we do not take these measures, Cornelius, and something interesting is also what is being or coming out of, like, the billions allocated for young people. There are those who say when you walk into the banks, what they tell you is not what you hear on TV. Now, the operationalization of this fund. There is that 3 billion that was launched somewhere in 2020. It was launched in June by the president, and then the cabinet secretary unveiled it in December. There are those who went to banks and they were told, we are yet to receive anything. And this, again, puts young people at bay, because the conditions set to get this money are so stringent that an ordinary young person with a business idea cannot access. Because if you are told, bring a security, what do you bring? So we also need what we call charity initiatives, like social welfare programs, you see, so that if there is this money that has been guaranteed by government, whether or not I have a security, I can get it. As long as I'm able to produce my business plan and it is vetted and deemed fit and can work. You get? That should be the qualification to get this money. But when you attach things like securities and collateral, it becomes a problem. Lastly on that one is that this is the second last or the penultimate budget for President Uhuru Kenyatta. What is evident in this budget is that the president wants to complete all the projects he initiated. And of course, that's why you've seen this legendary road infrastructure being rushed through, so that the president can launch his pet projects and retire. But now, you know, spending grows the economy. The downside is, if it is too much spending and you have to raise revenue on an already suppressed business environment, you risk plunging people into poverty. Because when I pay too much taxes, that means I have less to spend. That means I cannot get a health insurance. That means I cannot take my children to a good school. That means I cannot go and buy other products and get services that would earn government more revenue. One example, when we increase taxes on motor vehicle sales, what do we mean? Essentially, this means not very many people can afford a vehicle. On the flip side, if you lower taxes on motor vehicle sales, many people will afford motor vehicles. That would mean many people will buy fewer. And when you see, like, fuel is where government gets a lot of money, one of those high earners of revenue. So if I was somewhere in the treasury, I would tell them, can we lower taxes on motor vehicles so that we allow as many people to buy vehicles And in turn, of course, they'll go into a petrol station and draw in liters of fuel. And
Thanks for that, Edwin. Now, Mr. Kosgei, when you look at our current debt amount that we have, just the committee, the budget committee in the National Assembly talked of, for us to make it with this 3.6 trillion budget, we must increase our debt ceiling. That is one.
I heard.
Two, there is the issue of the debts that have already matured. That is the SGR. And at the same time, we have the Eurobond loans that has to be repaid. At the same time, the projects are there, facing at us. But we come to look into that after a quick commercial break. Do not go far. Keep it on CAK TV.
We welcome your feedback on our programming. For questions or comments, kindly get in touch with us on email info@kaktv.org, SMS us on 22167 or call us on 0794 588 054.
Over the last 70 years, PCA Tumutumu Training College has continued to produce globally competitive nurses who have created a positive impact in the nursing field within and beyond Kenyan borders.
I did my training at the PCA Tumutumu Hospital Training College, where I got equipped with the nursing skills I have currently to partake my career.
I'm glad to have trained as a nurse in PCA Tumutumu Training College, where my faith and belief in God was upskilled, and my skills to offer quality and satisfactory nursing care services were sharpened.
With a highly qualified teaching staff, modern training facilities, and student exposure to all clinical practices from our busy level 5, we boast of 100% pass during final external examinations for the last 2 graduating groups. Join us and take advantage of our partly sponsored tuition fees of only 40,000 shillings per semester, the lowest in the country, and a fully sponsored free accommodation within the college for all boarders. Our intake is in January, March and September in the following courses: Higher National Diploma in Critical Care Nursing, Diploma in Kenya Registered Community Health Nursing, Diploma in Nutrition and Dietetics, Diploma in Perioperative, Certificate in Perioperative, and Certificate in Nutrition and Dietetics. To apply, visit www.pcatumutumuhospital.org or call 0727 327 044. Welcome back. Mr. Kosgei, before we went for a break, there is something we were looking into, and this was the issue of current debt that we have, that is the Eurobond, the SGR loans. But again, someone is acting behind the scenes. So far, what has the SGR been able to deliver? Is it even able to pay a single coin to wherever it came from?
Well, Omose, the budget is should be prepared through public participation. Were you asked about anything?
Maybe I was busy inside here. But you and Kegoli, you must have been asked.
Should have been consulted. And I'd like to talk to the government straight. It should be made through public participation, and it should reflect the wishes of the people in the country. And it is law that it should go through public participation. How is it going through public participation? Through parliament. But it should go lower than that, because parliamentarians are involved in preparing this budget. Another point I would want to bring out is that there has to be another day of auditing whether we implemented the budget that we had last year. Where is that public day where the treasury comes to us and tells us that this is what we achieved before? Or these are just words which are made, we put our maua huku and we make sure that it's a very special day for us. Why don't we have a day that we come and look into a budget that we made before, you know, so that we can know whether what we put into the public sector, whether it is working. Now, another thing is the one you just asked. The government raises money through borrowing. The fiscal deficit. It raises money through borrowing. One, it can borrow locally. Two, it can go to the capital markets to borrow. You mentioned Eurobonds. That's a capital market. Another one is raising taxes. I heard you talking about what are the effects of higher taxes. Even one is morale. How much are you taxed? Around 30%. When you look at that, the government takes 30% of your money. What is the morale of the people? People will not even want to work. So you can raise money through taxes. And there are positive effects of taxes and there are negative. One positive effect of tax is that the economy is able to move on.
Regardless of whether we have corruption, the monster around or not.
Corruption is another story altogether.
Yeah.
Corruption is another story altogether. But taxes help the country move on. Overtaxing the country will even bring down your morale. And Kegoli said that you will even lack money to save. We are encouraged to save, but you can't have money to save and even buy a house or even do investments as the country, because the country is fired through investments. So when you overtax, it becomes problematic to the country itself. But the government must bridge the deficit by taxing, borrowing, and going to the capital markets. It has to. Otherwise, the country will run into a standstill, you know. So we have to be taxed. We have to. Yes. But problems comes in when we have a lot of pending bills. I can see an allocation that was done by the Minister for the CS that pending bills should be paid before 30th. Contractors of the government usually inflate bills because they don't know when they are going to be paid. So it is going to be inflated because you don't know. The banks also have their interests. You have to pay. So there are pending. So you get the government, even the cost of doing the projects in the government is too high. Because your bill will be pending next year. And the banks will be asking you to pay even the interests that are going up to next year. So the cost of running business in the country with the government is too high. You've talked of corruption. Corruption needs only working judiciary. If we
without executive,
if the judiciary works, then corruption will be a thing of the past. There is our budget right now is 3.6 trillion. So we can say 30% is stolen. Those are the statistics that are that are outside there. That is 1 trillion.
Omuse, my colleague has raised a very important point that I think it's important to reiterate. You see, as long as we've not tackled the issue of corruption, next year, at a time like this, the question we will be asking ourselves is that, are we better off than we were in 2021? And that should be the baseline question. This budget, as we see it, is the largest ever. 2022, we'll be talking again about the largest budget ever. The question is, have we tackled the downside issues? You are only as strong as your weakest link. As long as the bucket remains perforated, you can continue pumping water in there, but the water will be seeping out. So you'll be wondering, why is this bucket not filling up? Because there are perforations that are letting water go. The president is an authority to cite in this country. And he is on record admitting that about 2 billion is stolen on a day. You can calculate how much money that is annually. And when such a statement comes from the head of state, it should send some people into urgency mode. What is His Excellency saying? What containment measures can we put in place to tackle these issues of stolen money? Because these monies that we are losing, whether it's 2 billion or 1 billion or 1 million, that is taxpayers' money. That is money borrowed that is supposed to be returned. And if we borrow money without properly investing the money to generate revenue enough to be able to repay itself, generations currently and after us, they'll still be meeting these issues. The bad economic decisions we make right now, they will reflect on our children and on our children's children, and we don't know up to how long. When we are talking about raising revenues, and my colleague has raised different methods government uses to raise money. The government will increase taxes, the government will go into borrowing, and when the government has reached, say, a debt ceiling, and of course Parliament is going to increase it to 9 trillion, and that will continue to grow, that means the burden of repaying the loans is put on us and the generations to come. So what do we need to do in order to raise enough taxes? Cornelius, these things are clear-cut. Number one, empower people, make people productive, make people get to work, make people earn. By earning, they will spend. By spending, government is able to raise taxes. That way, we will be able to fund our budget significantly. Because during President Kibaki's era, there was a time we funded our budget by 95%, only borrowed 5%. That meant we were making great progress in terms of being self-sufficient. That would mean we were not at the behest of the Bretton Woods institutions that would come in dictating terms when they give us loans, you know, like fire a number of people, do these austerity measures. That's what IMF and World Bank would do when they are loaning. They loan you with conditions. Their loans are good, but they come with heavily cutting conditions. And when we talk about investment, Cornelius, why is Kenya losing FDIs to Ethiopia? It is because in Ethiopia, power tariffs are moderate. Power tariffs are manageable. When we talk about power, say for example the cost of electricity. Here, a unit goes about 24 Kenya shillings. How much is it going in Ethiopia? It's much less. So when you're making investment decisions, you look at such matters. And when Ethiopia's business environment is favorable, of course, they will attract more. So we have monopolized Kenya Power to the extent that they can charge people at will. They do not have competition. What if the government liberalized production of power so that there is the inception of the private sector into power production? That would mean Kenya Power risk losing clients to competition, fair competition. But as long as they remain a monopoly, then they continue to dictate and control power tariffs to the detriment of investment. And Cornelius, you mentioned about the allocations to the universities. Look, these investments, I am highly doubting that the monies allocated to universities is going to increase or improve the quality of learning.
Before we get to the university issue, the cabinet secretary, before even today, there was an indication earlier, testing waters in the dailies, the information came from the ministry, that what the students are paying right now is not commensurate to the situation in the ground. And we are thinking of tripling the payments. So there were noises, I know Kina Kosgei and Comrades Power, Kina Edwin spoke it out, and then it went low. But today, the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury has hinted that the Ministry of Education is going to engage stakeholders on how they are going to reach the 200,000 required.
Omuse,
So
it is a proposal. Yes.
the 120,000
Yes.
was done in the year 1991.
Yes.
So don't you think in a way also the CS is justified? Because if you talk to our grandfathers, do you have a grandfather, something like that?
Wow.
Or people who lived in those years of 1991?
Yes, yes.
They'll tell you they are buying these shoes that we are putting on maybe 2 shillings, 3 shillings. So
Yes.
do you want the situation to be the way it was then? I'm
Now-
just asking the way they were asking.
Omuse, I had the CS Ukuri Atani very well. He was not conclusive. The government is going to form a task force to look into it. What are the timelines? What are the timelines? Because it would really help to help us in our schooling. But are these only pronouncements from the podium at Parliament just to get to us and we move on? I am yet to see which committee is formed, what they say, what recommendations are going to be there, and whether the recommendations are going to be acted upon. Maybe even it's going up to next year, Cornelius.
Let's look into allocation to counties. Today there was a projected increase on the allocations, that is for 2021-2022. It has moved to 409, close to 410 billion Kenya shillings. But again, in the morning I had Governor Alfred Mutua of Machakos County talking of
Bureaucracy.
things that, not bureaucracy, he talked of there's no money, they have not received money for a number of months before.
3 months.
So Mr. Kegoli, how is this going to be achieved if this financial year is ending in a few days from now? They have not received their full allocation, then another allocation has been increased for the year 2022, 2021, 2022.
Well, I do not know if the billions allocated to counties will actually be disbursed to counties. Allocation
For these, for 2020,
Yes.
2021.
Yes. Allocating is one thing, disbursing the monies, and not just disbursing, but also disbursing them in good time to appropriate is another. Because we've heard governors, some of them say that we get disbursement and we are asked to appropriate the money within a week, after which the remaining monies have to go back to the National Treasury.
Yes.
You see, public funds are not just monies you receive and appropriate. Like, they are checks, highly, so a lot of checks and balances towards you getting that money from the public coffers into what it's supposed to do. It undergoes a lot of procedures. So my prayer is that in this financial year, can we empower counties? Let us disburse these monies in good time, so that governors will not come out to say, we've not paid our staff, there is no money to buy medicine, we cannot take care of our health facilities, we cannot take care of early learning students and the facilities thereof. Let them have no excuse that we didn't have the money. And something that worries again is this. Even after disbursing whatever monies that has been sent to counties, some of the county government would allocate 0 on development. That is a cause for concern. Why would you allocate 0 on development? That means you do not have your priorities right. So our county governors should also be serious about the work. As they say that we're not receiving the money from the National Treasury, even Treasury itself is like, what will some of these governors do with this money? So, but the baseline of this issue is this. Devolution is still a child developing in this country. This is, in 2010, it was the first time it was being put in the constitution authoritatively. So can we empower devolution? Can we allocate resources? Can we give it the much support? And also, Cornelius, as we increase allocations to county government, let there be robust systems of checks and balances so that these monies are spent well. County government could be key to unlocking the issue of rural-urban migration with authority. In my remote village, I do not have to think about coming to Nairobi to get things done. I can get a business facility at my county level. When I walk to my county government office, I can ask for, can I get a youth facility to run a business here? That will be lessening pressure on Nairobi. So Nairobi's population can get proper attention and concentration so that services are rendered very well. We get water into our slum areas. We get proper sewerage system so that sewer lines are so unclogged that when you've seen the situation when it rains in this Nairobi of ours, it gets messy and chaotic. So can we get a better plan to get Nairobi to the status that we need it to be? Lastly, county revenue generation. We are at a time when innovation is dictating a lot of things. And county government should come up with more innovative measures of raising revenue than overtaxing citizens. You see, like when you want to run a business, first of all, what you come across are, say, the permit fees, which you have to pay in full. Perhaps you do not have enough money. You cannot start your business unless you pay the money. And during Governor Sonko's time, I think he had introduced something like segmenting payment of permit fees. So you don't have to pay it in lump sum. You know, you pay a certain percentage as you start, and then you clear it as you run your business. That would be a good way to go about in business. So I would urge both national and county governments to come up with more innovative ways of raising taxes, not necessarily overtaxing our citizens. And that way, we'll be making progress.
Thank you, Edwin. Now, as we come to the close of the show, there is something here that will not wind up our show without touching it, and this is a Big Four agenda. During the second term of Jubilee, that was one thing that the president mentioned. I know, Edgar, when you are still together, when Jubilee was won by then, yes, this is something that you people are really pushing it. I don't know how far it is as at now. But again, now, let's look at the Big Four agenda. If it has been able to move from step A to B, or 1 to 2, that's 1. 2, if at all the president will leave power next year constitutionally, if you will suggest that the leader will take over to embrace the idea and move it forward from where the president shall have left, what is your take on that? Your review, just a review,
yes,
and then your parting shot. Yeah. As far as should Kenyans be resilient in this? Is there hope at the end of it all? How should they embrace this new budget?
Today, I was so keen to listen to how the CS tackled the issue of health. The issue of health, there are allocations to HIV, to malaria, to immunization, even to COVID-19 mitigation. And I didn't hear an allocation on cancer. Cancer is a menace. But it has done well in terms of health. But it has not gotten to that place where we need it. We can say that it's doing well. Another part is housing. Housing, today there was a very elaborate plan by the CS on how to revamp the housing. In building the affordable housing, a lot of billions have been allocated to affordable housing. And another one is the mortgage. The mortgage. I had mentioned that the government has built 1,000 units. 1,000 units from the government. 1,000 Kenyans, really, at the cost of around 2 billion. It is so expensive to build a house. 2 million shillings, you can build a house of two bedroom at 2 million shillings. Multiply by 1,000, that is 2 billion. How do you allocate 2 billion? Now, another thing is about infrastructure. I had him allocating 50 billion to electricity in the country. And I want to tell the government that it has done well in terms of electricity giving out to the families. It has done well in terms of rural electrification. But the cost of electricity in this country is really high. Something came to my mind when Kegoli was talking about electricity. He's talking about 24 shillings per unit in this country. Where is that? In this country, unit is 50 shillings. It is too high, higher even than what you said. And you cannot have two service providers in terms of electricity. What you can do is public participation in terms of electricity. And lastly, locust invasion. The pandemic itself affected our country's economy. So what we are doing right now is that the government should come out practically and implement whatever it said today.
Thank you, Kegoli. In summary, what is your take on the Big Four agenda? You can just tell us whether it has merit or not, and whether you advise the new leadership that will come in the year 2022, which maybe will be the one or Kosgei. You never know.
Good. Big Four agenda, a beautiful idea, a beautiful idea. Talk about manufacturing. When you lay emphasis on manufacturing, you're creating jobs. When we talk about healthcare, you are ensuring that the nation is healthy enough to be productive. When you talk about housing, you're making sure that you're taking care of the basic necessity, right, to housing. So when you talk about food security, you are tackling hunger, which is not only a Big Four agenda item, but also a sustainable development goal that the world is also championing against. Because right now, when you walk around the country, you can see people still suffering from hunger and disease. That means we need to implement fully universal health coverage and also get the agenda of food security done. And my parting shot to succeeding administration, when President Joe Biden took over, he signed on the very first day, he signed 17 executive orders reversing what President Trump had done. When President Donald Trump took over office from President Obama, he reversed a lot of what Obama had done. So there is no guarantee that, first of all, we don't know who will take over from President Uhuru Kenyatta. And whoever the person is, they will decide to do whatever they want to do. They are not obliged to do what President Uhuru Kenyatta had started. But then again, the question is, why should the country lose money because of stalled projects? So can we just complete it and find some economic sense in it? Lastly, is that as a country, we are at a defining moment. And every decision we make today, be it investment decision, be it taxation decision, be it electing in leaders into office, this decision will reverberate across generations to come. And I want us to be on the history of telling our children, when the time asked us to make a decision, this is what we did on your behalf. And I appeal to my fellow Kenyans that we as a country can make the right decision coming 2022. So can we get the right leaders in place? Because if we get in wrong leaders, we will be at a more worse state than we can imagine.
Many thanks. That is a very wonderful analysis from our political and economic analysts tonight in studio. And we've had an opportunity to dissect and to look into more pressing and more important issues on what actually happened today in the budget reading in the National Assembly. We appreciate a number of your comments that have been sent here, though we cannot be able to read. Till next Thursday, God willing, I wish you a very good night from me, Cornelius Omuse.